We got George with us. Hey, George, quick mic check on there.
Hello, Richard. Hello, Jaina. Nice to meet
Hey,
you and
George.
to the event. Yes, Richard, the mic is great.
Okay. Well, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on our VBOUT monthly meeting. Today we have an amazing topic and a lot to cover. So I highly encourage you grab your notepad because my guest is about to rock your knowledge warehouse. She brings with her a wealth of tips and tricks, and we're going to talk deep strategies, the future of email, and a lot for you to take on. I want to welcome our guests who join us almost every month here. We have Anish, Danielle, GC, Gio, Henry, Kasim, Kevin, and Molly. Thank you for joining wherever you are in the world. Also, we're broadcasting this on YouTube. George will be assisting in any comments on that side. Please keep an eye on that front. And everything we do, everything we talk about is going to be reshared with you after this as a summary, including Jaina's information, contact details, and so on. I do recommend you connect with Jaina, an amazing resource to have or to be in touch with, and you'll have that content delivered to you. Before I get started, I just wanted to give a quick shout out for our sponsor for today, VBOUT. VBOUT is your Swiss Army knife for all things email marketing, marketing automation, and multi-channel AI chatbots. If you
Richard,
use VBot, you know we have about 14 tools combined in one place that allows you to deliver those email campaigns, to take the strategies that Jana is about to share with us today and implement them step by step so you can find success. Um, but at core, these are the three features that the platform focuses on.
Richard, sorry for interrupting, but your screen is black. We cannot see it.
You got it. Thank you for telling me, George. I will share again.
Yes, please.
Okay. How about now?
It's still black.
That's weird. Okay. Let me try to.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's still.
Okay, apologies here, everybody. Just a few technical difficulties. Let me try to tackle that. Hmm. Okay, it was fine before. Yeah, it was fine before. All right, you know what?
Yes.
I'm gonna give it one last attempt here. I'm using a couple of screens, so perhaps something's off.
Yeah, Anich said it's working fine from his end, but Henry and me uh, are seeing the same.
Okay. What do you see now?
It's still black, and your screen appears very low. It looks like it's cut from below.
Oh, wow. Okay. This is very odd. All right, well, here's what I'm going to do. Jaina, I'm going to drop in the presentation to you. Man, can you try to share your screen? And sorry, everybody, this is usually a flawless process here. Um,
Yeah,
Don't
of course, I can try.
let me see if I can share it real quick. This is optimized video sharing. Yeah, do you guys see anything now?
know,
I
guys.
can see, yeah, I can see
Is
the
it working?
PowerPoint.
He said he's seeing. They are seeing. So maybe it's the problem is only from my side. But when I saw Henry saying the same thing, then
Okay, we got to get going. So this is, everybody can see my PowerPoint.
Yeah, they are seeing, yes, you
All right.
achieve, yes.
Cool. Well, anyways, we're just talking about VBOT here, just to wrap things up. What comes with a great price, premium support, and a stack is simplified, so you can get the learning curve cut in half and get going in no time. If you are not part of our community on Facebook, I highly encourage you to join us. We're about 20,000 members strong between all the different communities, with a distribution channel over almost 200,000 on our email list. So all the content that we share will be also distributed across the board. George, please drop in the chat um, the
Sure,
link to the group so everybody can connect as well.
sure.
All right, another final check here on the technical side. Can you guys still see my screen?
Thumbs up here.
Good. All right, let me introduce my awesome guest for today. We have the beautiful Jaina Mystery. She's a brand, content, and email marketing leader with extensive background in B2B SaaS and startup growth. So if you are in B2B, you're SaaS or you're startup, you're in the right place. He specializes in connecting the dots between brand storytelling, something we all struggle with, marketing tech, and buyer behavior. Jaina also believes the next era of digital will be defined by emotional resonance, something that everybody here has a lot of, but not just personalization. Her work and insights have been featured in MarTech, Media Post, Chief Marketers, and Demand Gen Report. Jaina, thank you so much for coming in on the show today.
Thank you for the invite, Richard.
Absolutely. Jenna, let's get started. I know many of the people who are with us or who'll be watching are actually email marketers by heart. So tell me, tell me a bit, and this is something that, from the first step of starting an email strategy or an email campaign, from your experience, where do people usually start if they're starting from scratch?
But if you're starting from scratch, you need to identify who your email or your newsletter team is. There could be a team of one. That's totally fine. I've been teams of ones in the past, but you've got to be able to define who owns the strategy, who owns the content, who owns the copywriting, who owns the sending of it all, just to avoid any confusion further down the line. And everyone knows what their responsibilities are and how they can support the email program. And then another thing I think a lot of people tend to forget about, they just want to get up and running with their email program. They want to get going with it, which is totally understandable. Email's super cool and exciting. But they forget to identify their goal, their like especially realistic goals. And I would say that goals are very dependent on the type of emails that you're sending to. Like your newsletter goals are going to be different to your lifecycle email goals, to your transactional email goals. So you really have to understand what your goals are, and then make sure that they're realistic too. If we think about newsletters, which is a huge passion of mine, a lot of people want to do a newsletter because they see everyone else doing it and it's really cool, and they see this brand doing it and it's awesome, the content's amazing, but then when they start it, their goal is around revenue generation, pipeline generation out of singular newsletters. And when that doesn't happen immediately, they see the newsletter as a failure, and it's like, oh, well, that didn't work. So I think defining realistic goals, especially for your newsletters, is critical to not doom it to success. And then also just understanding like what type of newsletters you want to send, like which I'll be talking a little bit more about a little bit later on in this session.
Yes, we will. And just, to revisit our attendees here, what are you guys doing in terms of email? What are your goals? Drop it in the chat. Let us know. If you're doing email marketing, B2B newsletters, what are your goals? What are you expecting to get out of those? I'm just curious to hear from those who are attending today. So you're saying just start from setting your goals first before you start your email strategy. And I've worked with companies who start from scratch and they immediately slap random content from third-party places and they start sending almost like a news update. The newsletter is lacking personality. It doesn't reflect the company's core values nor the service offering. And I see people struggle a lot. So do you think people they should or companies should start from their core offering and talking about the problems they're solving for their customers? Is that
I think it's almost worth going one more step back, is really knowing your audience and knowing who your customers are and who you want to target, like who do you want to speak to, because then you can align and make sure, like obviously your product should align to who your audience is, but then really understand, okay, so this audience, you might be able to infer their job title. So maybe they're primarily like leadership level, or maybe they're more individual contributors, or they're people who are in the weeds of things, and be able to use your newsletter to speak to them in a language that connects with them. I think that's the one thing that a lot of people forget, is you've got a newsletter will only do so well if it can truly connect with the audience that it's trying to connect to. So I think that's another layer in the kind of like strategy level of understanding the success, and like how you can make your newsletter successful, is really understanding the audience that you've got to be you're targeting.
so we come back also to the three who's, right? The who, the
Yes.
what, and the why you're doing it. And that comes at the getting started level. Like if you can
Mm-hmm.
lay all these on one Word document, one page, I think that gives you a little starting point in terms of what your strategy should be for email and where to get started. Um, now, another challenge that people or companies face is I don't have enough people on my list. How do I grow my list? I only have 10 people from random contacts and events that I've done. So, what are your recommendations on the best way to grow an email list?
I will say the one thing that people should absolutely not do is purchase a list and send to a purchase list. I know that's still somewhat of I've seen it on email marketing subreddits, on the marketing subreddits. So people still talk about buying a list and sending to a purchase list. You don't know who's on that list. You don't know how old those email addresses are. It is a quick way to start your newsletter program on the wrong foot. So what I will say, like one of the simplest things that anyone can do to get their newsletter list growing is adding subscription form to your website. I think a lot of people do this. It's a very good tactic. Add it somewhere that is a little bit sticky and relevant to your audience. A lot of people put it in the footer of their website, which is a great place because people scroll websites. I mean, people are used to scrolling on their phones and their apps. People are used to scrolling on the websites. Make a compelling subscription field at the bottom of your website. Um, Another thing that works very well, but can be a little bit annoying. I mean, I personally get annoyed by them because I feel like they're personally attacking me sometimes, but website pop-ups work. And I think there's a stat from Wise Pops, and they say the average conversion rate for a website pop-up, so a little pop-up that happens on websites asking to fill in a form, is around 4.65%, which is a pretty good conversion rate. So I would say that's a good place to start, but to get really strategic and making kind of the most out of your website pop-up is figure out the best places, the most relevant places on your website where a newsletter subscription would make the most sense. For example, if someone is searching on your blog or reading a blog post, maybe they get to the end of the blog post and you've kind of got a signal that they've read it. That's a really great time to serve a pop-up because they might be interested in hearing more about you, getting more of your content. Or even if someone is looking at your customer success stories or your case studies, those are the kinds of things that often get featured in newsletters. And again, it's more content. People are wanting to people have read that, they visited the page, they probably want to read more of that. So I would highly suggest using website pop-ups as subscription form on your website. Even having a dedicated landing page for your newsletter as well is something that I would highly recommend anyone doing who's going to be launching a newsletter, because it gives for someone to find out a little bit more about your newsletter, and it gives you the opportunity to showcase a little bit more about your newsletter. You don't just have to put a subscription form on that landing page with a single field asking for the email address. You could include screenshots or images of the newsletter to give people an idea of what to expect from the newsletter. You can even, like, as your newsletter grows, you can add social proof if that's something that starts kind of rolling in. If people are replying to your emails and your newsletter and saying like, this is amazing, add that social proof to that landing page as well. And then the final thing I would suggest, like if you're just starting out, we want to grow it organically, is as long as you've got an active audience on organic social, so LinkedIn, X, Facebook, wherever that might be, share your newsletter on your organic social channels and drive the people from there to the subscription landing page that you have on your website. But don't just, I think the tricky thing is people often just say, hey, subscribe to our newsletter, and then just take people away to the website. LinkedIn and so many other like social media algorithms are kind of penalizing people who are trying to get people to go away from those social media platforms. So you don't want to just like add a link, add some context, and like share like what people are going to get out of that newsletter, and then share the link to the subscription landing page in the comments. I would say those are the kind of the main things you can do to start growing your newsletter organically and just keep that momentum up.
That's great. I've seen people using VBout leveraging social media effectively. So what they're doing is they're breaking down their newsletter into small short form videos. So let's say your newsletter is talking about 5 different topics, which can be summarized in 1 minute each. And then what they end up doing is they're using the comment to DM automation to generate from the views on those newsletter topics, eventually getting people to connect with them on the DM. So they're not even leaving um, they just say leave a comment, Jaina, and we will send you like the entire content for this, or and they're collecting emails directly from Facebook or Instagram. I think it's a great method. Not sure if people with us today are using it, but to avoid that kind of link out, that's
Mm.
something to consider. Um, how about paid media that drives people to sign up and submit their email? Is this something that you have seen success with?
I haven't personally seen success with it. And I think that's primarily because paid media is very expensive, or it can be very expensive, at least, especially if you're trying to target very niche audiences. And the return that you get on a newsletter subscriber often isn't something that can be valued in such a way. I think that the goal of a newsletter is to drive awareness and is to drive and build a relationship up. Whereas with paid media, you kind of want that immediate conversion and you want something that is going to give you revenue immediately. Where I see that being successful is when you have those huge media like newsletters like Morning Brew, Marketing Brew, TLDR. They have they're essentially media organizations. They can run paid ads to drive people to subscribe to their newsletter because they're also selling sponsorships out of their newsletters. They're doing other things that drive that their newsletter essentially drives revenue for them. So I think for paid media, potentially it could be something to experiment with just to see if it has any, if you have like a really targeted audience. For example, maybe like your customers are they haven't subscribed to your newsletter, but you know who they are and you can target them through organic social. They could be a good group to kind of get them to subscribe to your newsletter.
Mhm. Thank you for that. So you got to get creative. To summarize this point, starting at the base level, understand the who, why, and what you're offering so you can come up with the strategy, at least for the content, because you do need steady um, content. I'm gonna jump into that in a second. And to grow your list, ideally, you should do it organically. Jana does not recommend purchasing lists, so you got to work hard on getting those first people interested and convert to those views from social to email if you can, be it via the comment to DM or be it via offering some downloadable that's so awesome that people are willing to give you an email so they get their hands on. Um, but let's talk about content strategy. And honestly, we struggle with it. Every company I worked with struggle with it at some point. I mean, how do you get your content and make it appealing for people to keep coming back, opening and engaging?
It's challenging. It's definitely tricky. It's kind of one of those areas that is very much a team sport. With newsletters, specifically B2B newsletters, I kind of see there being two distinct types of newsletter that you can kind of build your content strategy around for your newsletter. I see editorial and curated content.
Okay.
So an editorial newsletter is typically it's typically a newsletter that could be like from an individual at your company or it could be from the brand, but you are using that newsletter vehicle to share opinion-led thoughts and kind of ideas that really resonate with the audience. It's kind of written as a letter. There may be some images in it, but they're more about driving awareness and building a relationship with your audience and building that trust up. You're becoming essentially a trusted advisor for your audience. So those are editorial style newsletters. And then the other one is a curated content style newsletter. And I think that's the one that are like, I feel like the majority of B2B companies tend to do this, and even companies in general tend to do this because the main metric, and we'll talk about metrics a little bit later, but the main metrics people tend to like align email and newsletters with is the click. So a curated content style newsletter is all about curating content and then sharing snippets of that, sharing your opinion of that, and then driving people to like read the full article somewhere else. They could be sent weekly or monthly, but they're really, the curated content style newsletter is really great if you already have a really strong content program, but you don't have a good distribution channel. You haven't really got a way to distribute your content very well. So a curated content style newsletter can help you kind of accelerate your distribution for your content. And also something that I highly recommend people do when it comes to curated content style newsletters is sharing content that's not just yours, but from other sources, other websites, other individuals, because then you're building like authority and trust that you not only know what you yourself as a brand are talking about, but you know who else to trust in the industry or the vertical, wherever you're in as well. And that can be really like a really powerful thing. Like we did this at Litmus with Litmus Weekly. It was our weekly newsletter that we sent to an audience so that people who had all subscribed to it, where about 50 to 60% of the content was Litmus owned, Litmus sourced. It was our blog posts, our ebooks, our webinars, our resources. And then 40 to 50% of it was elsewhere. We would share social media posts from individuals in the industry. We would share interesting blog posts and resources that we had seen other companies and other brands post as well. But it helps us build like an authority of like, oh, they know what they're talking about, what they're in their own writing, but they can also see it and are a part of the community in the industry. So I think that's the first step in understanding like what your content strategy is for your newsletter.
So would you say editorial is about your own content, your own thought leadership, whereas curated is the sources you're getting your thought leadership from, and you're just adding them so people can know these people know their sources. They know how to learn, and they're sharing that knowledge with us.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
that a right way
And I
to?
think and I think also there's you can and should still um share your opinion in a curated style content. I think it still needs to have your brand's personality, it needs to have your brand's perspective, it needs to be a unique perspective for it to really stand out too. So I think there's just because it's a curated content style newsletter doesn't mean it's just like a dump of great content. It should be a dump of great content with your unique perspective on why the audience should care that you're sharing that with them.
It's almost like those short videos on social media channels where you're either making the content from scratch, and then you have those who start to comment, and they maybe create like a duet. So,
Yes,
um,
exactly. It's like it's essentially you're having a conversation with people who created this content, exactly how you said.
that's great. Now, I know each one of these might resonate better when people are in different parts of the buying journey.
Mm.
So, how do you custom tailor the delivery and the content based on where they are? How do you choose one versus the other?
Yeah, so this was always tricky for us when we were at Litmus, but I think one thing that we learned was that it can be a really good idea to tailor based on where they are in the customer lifecycle. So, for example, if someone is kind of maybe on the verge of buying, so kind of slightly more bottom of funnel, if you have a curated style content newsletter, which I think is the version that's easier to personalize in cases of the life cycle like this, sharing customer success stories, they could be written or they could be videos that share a little bit more about the platform, but also how you as a business are helping other people succeed could help those people who are a little bit more bottom of funnel to make that decision and be like, oh, this is a really great reminder of why I need this platform or this product. But then people who are a little bit more top of funnel, for example, maybe they've just signed up, maybe they've been with you for a week, 2 weeks, they would benefit more from like how to use your platform, how to like work with you as a business, how to partner with you. So more kind of like how to content about your platform. So I would say like trying to kind of imagine the funnel and understanding like where they are in that funnel and that life cycle. If they're really early on, sharing how to topics. If they're not, if they're more bottom of funnel, sharing kind of more customer success stories. And then even I would say I wouldn't ignore your current customers as well, because obviously your current customers, if you're in B2B SaaS especially, you've got a renewal date in mind for that customer. That might be a year, that might be 2 years from now. So making sure that you are sending like value-driven content about your platform and your services in your newsletter can act as a great reminder for those who are coming up to a renewal to kind of keep you top of mind. So when that renewal comes up, it becomes a bit of a no-brainer. It's like, yeah, sure, we're going to renew with you because we know how much value you already bring. So I think there's the curated style content newsletter is probably a little bit more apt for us, whereas like an editorial newsletter is just keeping your brand top of mind as a trusted partner. And that's probably not something that I would want to personalize based on where someone is in the customer journey.
So do you actually break down your target? And we're going to talk about the target list, but in this particular case, when we're talking about the customer journey and different content, some people immediately think marketing automation. But are we also talking about the traditional newsletter where I'm sending content this week and I decide to send it to this group? Because a lot of clients, they just send that newsletter to everybody, but then they have low-key automation on the back end that do the nurturing. So what are you talking about exactly here?
So I am talking about here, like actually personalizing the newsletter content itself and catering it to where they are in the customer journey. So I will also say that you, especially for kind of if you are offering kind of very high level service, very expensive, take the buying journey is incredibly long. And when you get to that last point, you really just want that customer to make that renewal, make that purchase. You may want to even consider pausing any newsletter programs and kind of email promotions that you might be sending to them because it might get a little bit noisy in their inbox. And they, rather than having like a positive effect, it might have a negative effect. So when they're closer to making that purchase decision, you really want them to focus on making that purchase decision instead of getting distracted with other things that you could be offering that could just kind of be noise in the inbox. So I think there's also kind of some marketing automation play in there. Like if someone is slightly later on in their buying cycle and they're kind of very, very close to making that purchase, tone down on the emails, the promotional emails that you're sending, and making sure that all of the kind of the sales led emails are still having an impact in their inbox.
Got it. Thank you for that. So how long should emails be? I've
It's a
seen
really
emails that big, and I've seen email that actually couldn't fit and they got cut off. So tell us more about that.
It's a really good question. And my answer is always going to be the same. It's like long enough for you to provide value to whoever's receiving that email, to your audience. It could be really short. It could be, and it should definitely align with your goals. You obviously don't want to write an email that rambles on and on and on. And by the time someone gets to the bottom, it feels like they've not learned or gained anything from that email. So I think it's really about how long enough to provide value. It's also worth testing too. Like you should, if you're creating an editorial style newsletter, write long versions, write short versions, see what resonates with your audience, see how long they're sticking around with the email. The same with the curated style content. You may feel like chucking in like, I don't know, 10 plus articles in there and getting people to click all over the place, or you may get more value from your audience by really focusing on like less than five or and having a bit more of a kind of opinionated take on it. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing I would also suggest is be aware about Gmail's habit of truncating emails. So anything over 102 kilobytes will get cut off at the end. And that's not the includes, it doesn't necessarily include like the size of it, like the images that you're sending in your email. It is literally the code length. So that's where like having a platform or having an email developer who really understands code and is able to be very smart with how they develop emails is going to be very important to make sure that your emails do not get cut off there. But I would say there's no like hard and fast rule with newsletter length. Like I often read newsletters from individuals and they just keep going on and on and on and have really short sentences and some really long sentences there. And there's a lot of psychology involved in there to help you keep reading and keep scrolling. So it's always worth experimenting with.
I worked I worked with somebody a few years back that their entire newsletter program was daily. It was a power tip of the day, and it consists of three lines. There's not even a design to it. It was, "Hey, today's Tuesday. You are the most beautiful human in the world. Believe in yourself. Have a nice day."
Yeah.
Next day will be like, "The sun is shining. We're all alive. I think we should be lucky. You are the luckiest person ever." Like that was a successful newsletter, and their open rates were upwards of like 70% because it was
Yeah.
just so short and people were just opening them naturally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Now it wasn't driven like there was no sales around it. There was no click here to buy. There was nothing to it. It was very simple, basic. And I actually, because I was on a test list, I was opening them every day
Mhm.
just to kind of see what's going on. But
That's
how
a
about how
great.
often? I mean, how often? Every day, every week? What is your recommendation there?
I feel like people are going to hate this answer again, but it really is as often as you can reliably create great, valuable content that resonates with your audience. There is absolutely no point committing to a daily email when you don't have the time, the resources, the budget, or the
Right.
ability to be able to send good emails every single day. So think about that. I think often people will commit to a cadence before they have their strategy in place. So really understand your strategy before you commit to a cadence. And then I would suggest you can always change your cadence. For example, if you commit to a weekly cadence and you're like, oh, I can't do this every single week, switch it up to bi-weekly or change to monthly, and then let your audiences know so they have that expectation set as well. um one big tip I would always suggest though is like if you are starting out sending your emails, your newsletters, and you change it, make sure you specify like a date and a time. So like at Litmus we always like, hey, Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern is when we're sending Litmus weekly, so people kind of got into the rhythm of expecting that email every single Thursday. So when it didn't go out, it was like, hey, it's late, what's going on? And they, like you'd have this core group of your audience who would really be wanting it. So I think that's another good thing is like when you're setting a date and a time for your cadence of your newsletters, be consistent with it, because then that'll help build a habit with your audience. They can come to expect your newsletters on that set cadence as well.
Because it is a lot of work. So if you want to commit to every day, there's going to be some work involved. I mean, if you think you can whip out an awesome newsletter once a month, it's just gonna be so rich and so good, then be it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the only mistake I think some can make is they want to do a newsletter, but they want to do it quarterly. Unfortunately, that can often backfire because you're set if that's all you're sending, let's say you're only sending a newsletter, because people often, like especially B2B SaaS and tech in general, they will be with a company, they will not be a company, their email address will suddenly die and not be available, they'll stop being. You need to have a consistent presence in their inbox. So I would
right.
say anything more than monthly is not worth doing when it comes to newsletter. I would say like daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, anything more than that, you're going to land in trouble when it comes to having a really engaged audience. And that's critical for deliverability, which we'll get into as well.
I do recommend in B2B a two-track email program. One is your nurture campaign that's delivering bite-sized, kind of relevant, but be it onboarding, be it sequence, and the newsletter probably should be your main program where you're delivering, bi-weekly or a monthly. Because at the end of the day, you also want to build up your reputation, something we're going to be touching on in a second. And doing it once a month, we've seen from experience, doesn't really build good. Well, it takes a long time to build a reputation with the SPs, Gmail and friends, right? And that sequence, I don't know why, have been proven to us to be once a week at least for 3 months. That's when people
Mm.
start to see more stable line of deliverability, more predictable open rates and click-throughs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just our observation on the back end.
Yeah.
Um, but let's talk about the audience. Now we
Mm.
talked about where to get started, some general content strategy ideas. Um, who do you send your newsletter to? That ties into how do you build your list. So talk to us about that.
I would say you can and should be sending your newsletter to everyone as long as they've actually signed up for it and they've opted in for it. Because they, like I said, like I'm going to be banging this drum until kingdom come, but newsletters are a perfect vehicle to help you build relationship with your audience, whether they're new to your brand or your business or are longtime customers, and even customers who maybe they're not customers with you anymore, but they still want to receive your newsletter. It's still worth keeping in touch with them through your newsletter to send to them. So I would say send your newsletter to whoever has raised their hand to want to receive it.
And I know some companies, they do create content categories, just call it
Mhm.
preferences. How big do you need to be to start offering content categories per se?
Are you talking about when it comes to kind of personalizing, kind of creating different content based on these categories for your newsletters?
So let's say you come to a preference page, you say, I'm only interested in your event announcements. I'm
Mm,
only interested in your monthly content webinars. So, you give them an option to pick and choose from a list of different things to receive.
yeah.
Small companies don't really have that much of a category. It's just one lump sum, a lot of everybody in the same bucket.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering at what point do you start offering that? What point meaning size company, um, etc.
think I think you could probably infer it from your newsletter performance. So say, for example, your newsletter is a created style content one, you feature your events, your ebooks, your blogs, outside resources. Once you start to see patterns in individuals where like, oh, this group of individual, all they care about is events. Once you start seeing signals from your audience that tells you it's time to consider, oh, maybe we should start building these preferences. I don't know whether it's like a size of your database or the size of your company. Again, it will also come down to the resources that you have available for your email program, your people, your budget, and how often you can commit to creating all of this content. But I think listening to your audience is often the best way to make these decisions, even though sometimes I'll say like the audience doesn't really know what they're talking about, but it's a good start to help you thinking about, okay, so clearly our audience only cares about this. We should consider pivoting and include and giving them the option to self-select.
So it's a great point that you probably should experiment with different kinds of content at the beginning to see which one resonates best. That could be a good strategy, if
Yes.
um well, thank you for that. And by the way, if anybody have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll share them with Jaina. We'll answer every single question. Um, I know many of you are great listeners, but we're here to also, see what's on your mind.
Mm.
All right. So,
Yes,
Jaina,
Rich.
how do you segment and personalize effectively as well? Do you do it manually? Do you use tools? And what kind of endpoints do you look at to use to segment effectively?
So I would say if you're even like when you're building your content strategy for your newsletter program right at the beginning, have a conversation about how you might want to segment and personalize in the future so you can start collecting data now, and that data could be like you said, like Richard, like you said, it was in a profile or a preference center where someone can self-select the type of content that they're interested in. I think setting that out at the strategy strategy time is the best time to think about, oh, we do want to start collecting this data, so it's not something that you do in hindsight that feels like an add-on thing that you're having to do for your newsletter. So I think that's probably like one of the best ways of that I think that you can kind of segment and personalize effectively is just like listening to your audience. And again, like infer from clicks too is another great way to be able to learn and segment from your audience, segment your audience. If you see a group of people and all they're clicking on is like the top call to action, and that is very, very specific content type, that's a great way to be able to personalize. Okay, so this group only wants this type of content. Let's just keep sending them this type of content. But starting out with your strategy, understand what data you may want to collect at some point and build that into your program as it grows.
Now, I know some of you use also enrichment data as part of segmentation um, to get firmographic, demographic details. How, in terms of relevance and hierarchy, do you think enrichment data matters versus actual data you're collecting from your tests?
It can, it can help you on the way to evolving your newsletter program, for example. So say you have firmographic data, titles, so you're able to bucket your individuals based on their seniority in a company or in a business. So you might want to send certain members of that audience, so maybe they're more kind of marketing senior leadership, or even if they are senior, you want to send them slightly different content to someone who is, for example, a developer who cares more about the nitty gritty of the work that they're doing. But and this is from my own experience actually as well, because when I was at Litmus, we launched a newsletter that was very focused on senior leadership, on marketing leadership. And then when we analyzed that audience, we saw, I think it was only around 10% of the audience actually had senior leadership titles, job titles. Everyone else was kind of aspiring to be senior leaders. So I think you can infer a certain amount from firmographic data, but nothing will tell you will help you segment and personalize better than actually hearing from your audience and what they want, and being from preference centers, profile centers, and even just kind of where they're clicking in their emails.
So listening to your own customer information, feedback, and form fill, then firmographic and enrichment data. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. I do have a question for Mike, but I'm gonna push it until the reputation. We have a section on reputation, Mike, so I'm gonna answer your question when we get there, if that's okay. Um, let's talk about choosing the right platform, right? I mean, there are so many out there, but people just think about, oh, there's a platform for newsletter, and there's not. Let's break it down a little bit, Jen. I know you have experience in this. So, how do you choose the right platform?
I'd say this is very closely linked to your goals and your strategy for your newsletter. So, for example, if you've chosen to do an editorial style newsletter and you've got an individual, the brand is going to be sending very opinionated, kind of like almost letters to their audience, that might benefit more from being on Substack or Beehive or even LinkedIn newsletters, where it's about gaining exposure from not just your email list, but beyond that, because that content will also be hosted on third-party platforms as well. So there's like a little bit more exposure that you can gain from your brand there. And I think like Wistia's founder, Chris Savage, does that well. He's got a newsletter that is on LinkedIn. Winter as well are another platform who've got a newsletter that's on LinkedIn. And I have saved today's issue of their newsletter today, ready for me to read, because it's always great. And then I think Todoist, they're another platform, and they recently migrated over to Substack for their newsletter because they wanted more exposure for it. So it's a kind of exciting time for you to figure some of that out. But then if you're leaning more towards a curated content style newsletter where it might benefit from being more designed, you need a platform that's going to help support that effort, because a beautifully designed email needs to consider user experience as part of it. So you need to be able to guide people where to click. So you need to have like nice call to action buttons, images, etc. But in the end, especially if you are like just starting out or trying to build your case for a newsletter for your business, I'm always a fan of using the tools you already have to hand. Because sometimes when you try and use new tools and jump at it, you're trying to learn too much and you end up kind of, again, dooming yourself to failure there. But if you're using a platform that you already know, you know how to use, that's going to be your best start in it. Because I don't think, yeah, I think that's always my suggestion. Like, we used a marketing automation platform at Limus to send all of our newsletters out. The one benefit there is a lot of our email metrics and email performance data was all centralized within our marketing automation platform, which we could then use to help us with other email programs. So there's a couple of options there, but it does all roll back to what your strategy or overall content strategy is and what type of newsletter you're sending out, and that will dictate which platform to use.
So Jenna's trying to tell you to use VBOUT, but I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. I think the main difference between the choices of platforms is also going to be how much data you want to retain and get your hands on. Um, Substack will be great, I think, if you want to charge some sort of a membership.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great
Yep.
option. LinkedIn is going to be very basic, and the reach and how you target people is completely different. You're not going to get access to their details beyond what LinkedIn provides. And creating something sophisticated to get more details and intent automation is not available. So I think ultimately you want to graduate to a marketing automation platform of choice. Keep out. But other than that, you can walk in levels here. Well, thanks for answering. Wondering if anybody here is actually using LinkedIn newsletter tool. I've signed up to a couple of influencers who are on it. I get some dings and notifications. I honestly haven't engaged much, but wondering if anyone here is using it or have feedback on it.
I remember the other day I was trying to find, this is kind of a tangent now, but I was trying to find in LinkedIn where I could see all of the LinkedIn newsletters I was subscribed to. It took me a good solid 10 minutes of trying to find in LinkedIn where I could find that information, and I've never been able to find it again. So I think there is LinkedIn is not designed for it. So I think there are some own challenges. You get exposure, but then you don't get, like you said, Richard, access to data and things that you could get with your marketing automations platform.
Thank you for that. All right. Now, deliverability. I mean, what are your top recommendations one of the most critical problems for everybody. I want to hit the inbox. I
Exactly.
want to get better results. I want more people to see me. Give us some tips here on how to do that.
Yeah, so make sure you're only sending to your opted-in email addresses. So make sure you're only sending to those people who have actually subscribed to newsletter. If not, it's a surefire way of getting people marking your email just as a spam. If they can't find the unsubscribe link, they're more likely than not, if they can't, they'll just hit the spam button. So make sure you're sending to your opted-in email addresses. Have your technical infrastructure set up correctly. So that's like your SPF, your DKIM, and your DMARC. The new sender guideline rules that have come out from Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft all require those to be set a very specific way. I don't have that to mind because I'm not a technical deliverability expert, but that is available on the internet out there. So they have very specific rules around how they should all
Yeah.
be set up. So definitely have that set up.
We have a lot of
Um,
resources on that, guys. We do have them on
awesome.
our blog. We do have them on our videos. We talked a lot about that stuff, so you'll find them on Bebop for sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Awesome. No, check that out. You need to have an unsubscribe link on every single newsletter you send and honor that unsubscribe immediately. I think there's caveats. You can say, "Oh, we'll unsubscribe you within the next 5 days, 5 to 10 days." That's not gonna. That again. That doesn't align to Google or Yahoo or Microsoft sender guidelines. That unsubscribe needs to be immediate. So definitely have that unsubscribe link on there. And then monitor your email engagement. So something that I often do is I like to monitor email engagement so that it's still opens, primarily opens and clicks too. Watch for dramatic dips in open rates because that can be the first sign that your emails, your newsletters are not landing in the inbox, but landing in the spam folder because no one can see them to open them. So monitor email engagement over time. I think that's the critical thing. Never look at something in a bubble. Never look at like, oh, this last week's newsletter open rate tanked. That must mean it's in the spam folder. Have a look at it over a month, 2 months, 3 months. Look at that trend over time. So that's another good thing to keep an eye on to make sure that you haven't accidentally landed in the spam folder and you're still emailing and you're still just compounding that issue of landing in the spam folder and causing issues with your deliverability. So those are kind of the things that I look out for. And like I said, Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft all have sender guidelines. I remember when these were all outed and implemented, I was singing from the roofs because it's the first time any email clients have really been very transparent about what it means to land in the inbox versus the spam folder. So keep your spam rate under 0.3%, and you can have a look at that via Postmaster Tools. That one-click unsubscribe is required in headers, and it's going to be visible in the email itself. You've also got to make sure that there is no from address spoofing. So that means that your from email address must align with the authenticated domain that you are sending from. And then again, to be compliant, your bounce rate has got to be low, your complaint rates have got to be low too. Something from a content perspective, avoid URL shorteners. I've had really bad luck with using URL shorteners in emails in the past. Usually those are the first things that spam filters and algorithms can look at to think that something is an email is spam when it's actually not. But I would say avoid those. Um, and then avoid sudden spikes in volume or frequency. I think that's another important one that a lot of people forget is that email clients like Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo, all those popular ones, they look at how many emails, how much volume of email you're sending. And if that suddenly goes up, that's a bit of an indicator to them like, oh, why has their volume gone up? Have they purchased a list? Have they done something weird so suddenly start sending thousands more email addresses? So keep that volume consistent and keep your frequency consistent. If you are considering increasing your volume, do it over time, like over like the course of a month,
Warm
two
up.
months, 3 months. Yes, exactly. Do a warm up of it, but
We can
just
recommend
avoid
warm-up
spikes.
plans, by the way, for somebody. You can go from sending 500 emails a day to a million a day in 45 days. So, but
Yeah.
you got to follow a certain plan that
Yes.
we are very well aware of here at VBout. Um, go ahead, Jana.
No, that was my last bit. That was like I feel like that's the the very basic things that you can do to ensure deliverability.
Now, Mike asks, does it matter the domain you're sending from? For example, if you're sending from a .com, .vip, .net, will .vip, for instance, get flagged or get more spam inboxes?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I know when it comes to like SEO or Google search, for example, .coms and .nets tend to rank slightly better. I don't know if that is kind of something that transfers over to the inbox, but what's more important is just making sure that you have your whichever sending domain you are using, that is properly warmed up so that you're less likely to land in a spam folder. But I can't say for certain whether certain domain names will get flagged or not because I've never used them, to be honest. I've always used kind of the primary domain names.
I know our experience here at VBA, Mike, domains don't exist in vacuum. You actually have multiple factors attached to the domain. One of which is how old is the domain before you started sending? If you purchased the domain yesterday, you're sending today, that's a bad signal. So you want to have some sort of a age on your domain. That's the first recommendation. The second is you need to have a web page with content and privacy policy on there. Don't ask me why, but when people add .vip or some TLDs that are not as common, the email service provider, such as our partners who use delivery emails, they might look at your domain or domain get flagged because it's not common, and they start to look when was it bought? Does it have a page and content? Does it have privacy policy? Also, you can scan the domain itself if it's flagged or blacklisted. There are free tools. Just Google blacklist check, and that should return some free options that you can check it. And if it's flagged somewhere, you need to delist it, then go back and send it. But it doesn't exist in vacuum. You can certainly send from .vip or others as long as you have some very solid connected domain presence. All right. How about cold emails? This is a big thing. Most people are doing it. I'm telling you, but even especially in B2B because they need leads. They're trying to kind of, after this Aaron Ross unpredictable revenue, who did this cold email program for Salesforce. It's a book I read 10 years ago, if not more. He just talked about how he curates very highly targeted 250, 300 people a day. He emails them, he checks opens, he follows up with them. People are still doing it. Now tell us your thoughts on it.
As a recipient of a lot of cold sales emails, they have never worked on me. The ones that have worked on me have been ones from organizations and brands that I already had some awareness of, that I already knew the name, I already kind of knew what they were doing. So this is where I think they can be very effective after a potential customer has awareness of your brand. Perhaps they've like already subscribed to your newsletter, they're active, engaging, they're clicking your content on your newsletter. Maybe they've even visited your website, they've specifically visited the product pages. Those are all good signals that would tell me now is probably a good time to drop these guys an email. This is like it, and it becomes off less as a cold email because they already know you as a brand. They already know what your service is, what you do. But I think like the old style cold sales emails are not effective. I've had some really terrible ones. I had one not too long ago. They obviously scoured my LinkedIn page and they picked something out there that I haven't thought about for like 20 plus years. And it was some volunteer work that I did at a dog shelter when I was a teenager. Why should that be on my LinkedIn? So that's like a whole other thing. But why did they pick that out to start the conversation with versus something more relevant? So it's I understand like there's still like this need for mass like getting masses of leads and getting loads of cold emails out and you'll land maybe like a handful and that's enough. But it can start the relationship off with potential buyers on the wrong foot and you don't want to do that.
And I have a confession to make. I made a big mistake with similar automation that was using LinkedIn and then based on that, grabbing and delivering cold emails. And the automation was basically scouring certain types of profiles and getting their posts. And based on the posts, it was deciding if it should send an email or not. The only thing that we didn't think about is that some of these posts were like 4 years ago. That was the last time that person posted, right? We're under the assumptions that people are posting constantly, but we had a big chunk or significant chunk of people who just posted 4 or 5 years ago, and we're like, congratulations on your recent job. You know, so data needs to be probably really looked at, especially in B2B. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
afford to make a mistake because people are bombarded with cold emails. And I've done a lot of, I did a really good workshop on this. I don't know, George, if you can grab that link for the cold email workshop that I did. I think I've put significant effort in it. Um, you can
Yeah,
see how things can go wrong. And I cover things you should do and things you should not, and how to do it effectively. So please drop it in the chat for everybody, for those who missed it.
sure.
But thank you for your feedback. I was going to tell you no cursing in this question on cold emails, but I didn't have to, so I appreciate it.
I held back. I definitely held back on that one.
Uh, all right, let's go to AI and email. Obviously, everybody's talking about it. What are your thoughts?
This is one of my favorite topics to talk about because everyone's talking about it, and it's very interesting. So I think AI is making the mechanics of creating and sending newsletters easier. So writing and refining drafts for your newsletters, for example, segmenting your audience, testing subject lines, even summarizing content so you can distribute that content elsewhere. It's all great at helping you save time and it's super helpful. But that doesn't equate to making a connection with your audience. Just because AI can personalize doesn't mean it can connect with the human beings who are receiving your newsletters, because the best newsletters are still rooted in a clear, unique point of view, human emotion and resonance and consistency. And I think that's the human touch. That's the critical bit. And I think the other part of AI that's kind of like changing how we create and send newsletters is the inbox, the changes the inboxes are making, like platforms like Yahoo and Apple Mail now generate AI previews. If your value isn't clear or your copy sounds robotic, it'll get ignored or deleted by the recipient because the preview that's been generated just doesn't resonate at all with them.
That's not the
So if
summaries you're talking about, right?
yes, exactly. Those
These
summaries
are
is
the
what I'm
summaries?
talking about. Yes.
Okay.
So like my take is AI should be the collaborator, not the creator. Use it to show up smarter in the inbox, but it's still on us as the marketers to make the newsletters feel unmistakably human. The best newsletters need to be feeling human.
I love those summaries, quite frankly. Now, it's not quite accurate. I still have a way to go, but I think it's on the right track, especially with Gmail.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you guys are finding them helpful, so you don't have to go through a very, especially when the thread is extremely long. I think it's becoming a little bit more relevant to summarize some points. Um,
Yes.
but drop in the chat. I'm wondering if you guys like that particular email summary that's been introduced. Um, cool. So what else on AI with email? Any other feedback? I know it's not enough. You shouldn't be just relying strictly on for content writing because you need your personality. People connect with you. They don't want to connect with an AI.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. And I think that's where that's where AI is a collaborator and not creator, I think is what I like where I really land on. Like it's got to be the thing that helps you get there. And I fully support and advocate for people who are using Claude, ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever they need to use to help get their newsletter out the door. But ultimately, you need to have like human checkpoints all along the way because I think like going back to the AI generated summaries and emails, they're pulling key points from your emails. They often ignore subject lines, headers, calls to action. But like you as a
yes.
human know that. An AI, ChatGPT, may not be fully aware of that, especially if you're not using the right prompts, if you're using it to craft an email. But you as a human can know that. So you can help carefully write copy that speaks a little bit to those AI generated summaries without it being misleading. So you've got to really think about like front loading key information, using semantic structure like headings and bullet points to guide those AI generated summaries to the right takeaway. So when it does summarize it, it summarized it correctly. I would say it's something like AI generated summaries are something to be aware of, but not to get too scared into changing your newsletter's tactics or strategy if they're still performing. If you feel like you have a lot of people who are using Apple Mail, you don't necessarily know how many are using the AI generated summaries to decide whether to open the newsletters or not. But something to be aware of, but don't necessarily be too scared into changing anything with your strategy until you see other indicators.
Or perhaps taking your email and asking Gemini, how would you summarize
Yes.
this email inside the inbox, just so you have a little feedback on that. That could be good because, like you said, there's no CTA here. It's just storytelling. And I
Yes.
think most people are going to basically just look at this in the future once it gets much better.
Yeah. I've seen some pretty terrible generated summaries, and they've still got a way to go before they're very valuable.
Oh, thank you for that. All right. Sorry, this is stuck here on my screen. Here we go. Let's talk a little bit. Two more things here. I know we're heading out the top of the hour, but how do you measure success, and what are the metrics you look for?
This is a great topic. Again, I'm going to go back to start with your goal for your newsletter. So metrics only matter if they map back to what your newsletter is trying to do. So if your newsletter is about thought leadership, look at forwards, replies, or dwell or read time on your newsletter. Those are great indicators. If your newsletter is more of a lead nurture, trying to get people warmed up, focus on clicks, engagement, engagement depth or conversions too. But then if it's more about community building, again, it kind of like thought leadership, look at replies, unsubscribes, and even social shares. They could be really good metrics to matter. But like the metrics that I pay closest attention to are clicks. They're the most direct signal of interest and intent. So I like to look at clicks. Click to open rate, less effective now that the open rates aren't really kind of, you don't know whether they're bots or not. But it is good to track over time, and it can give you an idea of how effective your content is after the open happens. Unsubscribes are also great. I mean, they're not great, but they do tell you when your content has missed them up, for example. So if suddenly your unsubscribes start
Better
piling
than
up,
spam, right? Better than hitting like
exactly,
saying spam, put this email in my spam box, you know?
much better than spam. So like that's a great indicator to keep an eye on. And then like you just mentioned, spam complaints always worth tracking, even if they are low, because the sender guidelines require spam complaint rates to be below 0.3%. So that's always worth paying close attention to. The things I'm less obsessed with is open rates. Still, like as a directional trend, it's great to help you understand deliverability, making sure you're in inboxes, still good. But they are unreliable considering we're in the post iOS world where Apple's mail protection, privacy protection has essentially made the open rate less.
Yeah, I got a joke on that. So open rates
So
are like compliments from your boss. You never really trust them, but you still need them to get through the week.
yeah, yeah, that is very accurate. Exactly that. So it's a great way to position open rates right now. And then the other thing I'm less obsessed with is raw conversion numbers. So without context, conversion numbers can be very, very misleading, and it can put you down the wrong path to change your strategy or whatever you're trying to do with your newsletter program. So I think raw conversion numbers, be very specific with what your conversion numbers. For example, if you are using your newsletter to promote an event where someone has to register for a webinar or an in-person event, that filling of the form for a webinar registration is a good conversion number to be able to track as a success metric. But if it's a conversion from like going from like an upgrade account, for example, for someone's upgrading from one plan to another, you don't necessarily know whether it was like the newsletter that did that. So you could assign poor metrics to that. So that's going the ones that I'm less obsessed about. And then I also like qualitative signals too. So this used to happen to a lot for us at Litmus, but like people reply to your newsletter and say like that was exactly the kind of content I needed, or they go to social and they post about it. Like that, those qualitative signals matter too, because they can be a really good indicator that the audience who you care about also care about your content as well. So like those are the ones that I would definitely also look at as well.
That's great. So what kind of metrics they should be looking for or benchmarks?
Yeah, benchmarks, I have a love-hate relationship with the benchmarks. They're helpful as a starting point, but they come with a bit of a caveat. So these are the benchmarks that I look at with that caveat attached to it. I would say an open rate, like 30 to 40% is probably pretty strong for opted-in lists. If it's lower than that right now, focus on your list hygiene, understand where you're actually acquiring those emails, and even think about your subject line and your sender name clarity. Is all of that information in the message envelope very clear? When it comes to click-through rates, I would say 2 to 5% is pretty average. Anything above 5% is really good, and you're doing the right thing, your content's resonating.
Mhm.
Um, Click to open rates, I would say again, 10 to 20%. Higher means your content is resonating better after the open. Again, it's kind of very much a, a, a fluffy benchmark there, I would say. And then unsubscribes, I would say anything under 0.2% is probably going to be considered healthy. Spikes, if you suddenly see 0.2% one week, and then the next week you send it, you see 5%, and the next week you send it, you see 0%. There's like a bit of a message misalignment there, or potentially some fatigue in your audience, or like your cadence of how often you're sending. Spam complaints, like I said, I would say the sender guidelines
Zero.
say below 0.3%. Yes, I would say as close to zero as you can get. You ideally do not want any spam complaints. And then like one final note I would say is like trends are better than snapshots. So one email will not tell the whole story of how
Right,
successful your
exactly.
email program is. You need to be tracking this over time, and then you will start to see really good trends that you can act on and update your strategy with.
So when you write the email, write it from emotions. When you look at the results, look at it from a scientific perspective. Don't get too
Yes.
emotional
No.
about the results of your
Unless
emotional.
they're really good. Unless they're really good and you want to shout it from the rooftops. Maybe a little bit of emotion is good there.
Final question here for you, Jane, before I take on any audience questions. Where do you see the future of email in the next 5 years?
So I think we will see more businesses operating that editorial style newsletter out of Substack, Beehive, LinkedIn newsletters. I think we're going to see newsletters seen as more of a content strategy program versus an email program with the use of these platforms, because there's less insight into your lists, your data, some of the things that you don't get when you see use a marketing automation platform. Because there's going to be more reliance on newsletters to push or drive to owned audiences versus the rented audiences you get on social media. So I think that that's going to be one of the bigger shifts. I'm also hoping slash predicting we see fewer but better emails out there. Like audiences are already overwhelmed. I can look at my own inbox every single day. I get so many emails from so many different organizations and businesses. Brands that win are going to focus on quality over frequency. So they're going to be making sure that every single one of their emails just knocks it out of the park. And I think newsletters will begin that shift from being kind of content dumps to that curated intentional experiences that we've talked about too. And I think another thing that email is going to be really helpful with is going to kind of like champion community over campaigns. What I mean by that is like the strongest newsletters will become extension of the brand's community, not just its funnel. Think of it like spotlighting on customers in the newsletter, behind the scenes content, or even like user generated tips in the newsletters themselves. So I think community is going to be kind of really intrinsic to the success of newsletters. But essentially, like, I think in 5 years from now, the inbox won't be about grabbing attention. It's going to be about trust building, because trust doesn't come from algorithms. It comes from showing up as a human time and time again. And like that's why I believe with all my heart that newsletters are one of the best vehicles to do that. So I think the future of email is going to be the newsletter.
I think the future of email is going to be more you, not your AI, speaking to people. And the more it's
Yes.
going to be you, more authentic, your voice sounds and feels like a human, even though AI is as darn good at it as we are.
Yeah.
I think people will be able to pick and figure out if it's you who wrote it or if it's not. So there's a challenge here in the next 5 years for you to find your voice and to really focus on, and I tell this to everybody, when you write an email, imagine the people, your recipients are standing right there in front of you and you're telling them what you're writing in the email. Don't imagine otherwise. How robotic would you sound and how impersonal would you be?
I
But
like that a lot. I think the conversational nature should be in your emails. You should be talking to human beings and emailing them, writing your emails as if you were talking to them.
exactly. And attention spam is so low. Like people don't have the time to choose amongst they will choose and anywhere from 3 to 5 email a day that they don't know who they are getting those from to open it.
Mhm.
And then the rest is going to be primarily invested in those who they know. So choose which bucket you want to be in. The cold 3 to 5 out of 1,000, or do you want to be one of those who's curated a nice community of engaged people? But yeah, anything else on that?
No, I'm very excited about the future of email. I feel like everyone's always talking about email is dead, email is dead. Email's never going to die. Email is one of those channels that is going to keep chugging along for a while to come.
Exactly. And I know you added like a sample newsletter here.
Yes.
Yes.
For anybody to see. We'll be sharing this with you guys, so thank you. But would you say this is an editorial style email on?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say like the Todoist one is kind of it kind of crosses the boundary between curated and editorial style, but it's more editorial style because it is using its what it believes about how to be really productive and how to apply it to the product that you've got. And so it shares lots of tips and tricks about not just being productive, but how you can use the platform to be able to do it. So it's very kind of opinion led. So that's why I would say that's a very editorial one. And then the yellow one there, that's from Winter. Winter is it's editorial, but they don't have it coming from an individual. And I think that's the one thing that I would kind of like to see change from them is have it be from an individual because the content feels very opinionated, but then it kind of helps their brand feel very opinionated, which is also a good thing. And that last one there is from Chris Savage, who's one of the co-founders over at Wistia. He has this great newsletter. It's all about like video content, which again, Wistia is a platform that provides video hosting needs for all sorts of businesses. And it is from like a founder's perspective too. So he's adding kind of another voice to the brand mix there, which is another trusted voice and
That's
kind of
LinkedIn,
playing
right?
with. Yes, that is. Those are both Winter and Chris Savage's ones are on LinkedIn. And they're the one good thing I'll say about LinkedIn is you do not need to know how to code an email to be able to send a good newsletter and have to worry about formatting or anything like that. So I think
Mhm.
that's one of the benefits of using LinkedIn's newsletters.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing that information. That was great details. I'll take a couple of questions. I already have one from Mike. Mike is asking, I'm moving companies, and my contract allows him to take 1,000 clients and move it to his new business or new company. What is the best way to introduce them to his new email communication while he's still in competition with the old company?
A tricky one because technically and legally, unless they have kind of opted in to receive emails from you, depends, I guess geographically it does depend on where you are. But really, if you're doing this right, if you were to email those 1,000 clients on your new domain name without having permission before you actually email them, you may end up in spam. They may just delete you straight away. If you're able to, I mean, this is a tricky one actually, Richard. Like if you're able to reach out to them and just like say, hey, I'm moving companies. If you're still interested in staying in touch, fill in this form or reply back to me and I'll make sure that you still hear from me in the future. I think like having that as an open conversation is the best way to do it. But technically, I think this is one of those ones that can get challenging because it 1,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but it takes,
It
I don't know,
depends if it's
half.
B2B, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it does. It
Now,
does. It
yeah, I would add, I mean, Mike, if they signed up to the company and expecting communication from the company, moving somewhere else and just sending it from a new company is going to trigger something's new. It's a new sender, new domain. If they signed up to you at the company, it might be a little easier shift, even though you're probably going to be using a new domain. My recommendation is, and I don't know how much time you have and how valuable these 1,000 clients and leads are. If you're saying clients, I'm assuming they're paying, so there's value there. I would dial them out directly and say, "Hey, John, this is Mike. I know we spoke in the past. I'm gonna send you a quick email. I just wanted to call you and let you know so you can expect it." Literally, just do that. Even though if they don't respond, leave a voicemail, given that you have their phone number, and given you're not breaking any contracts. And just in the email, introduce exactly what they're expecting from a new email program. That's it.
yeah, that's a great idea.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike, for the question. Anybody else? I'll take one more because we're out of time. Everybody's good.
Everybody's good.
Yes,
Perfect.
Richard. By the way, we were able to see the entire screen on YouTube, but not sure on Zoom. Maybe it's from my side. Guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask Jaina before ending up.
All right. Well, Jaina, this was great. Thank you so much. Everybody needs an email marketing workshop refresher from an expert every once in a while. Everybody thinks they know what they're doing, but I can tell you from a technology builder, I see how badly things are on the back end. So you are well needed. I hope whoever attended today found value in this content. I certainly did. And I really appreciate all this great feedback and information. Now, where can people find you if they'd like to connect? Just drop you on the LinkedIn.
Yes, I'm happy to connect with anyone on this call on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me there. Message me. I am my DMs are open. I feel like I might regret saying that, but they're open on LinkedIn.
You know what? A lot of people say, I don't know where to start with my email. I think you should take up Jaina's offer here. Hit a Jaina up in the
Yeah,
inbox or in LinkedIn, pick her brains, and maybe there's something for you there. Everybody has a resource to start from. So, Jaina, thanks a lot again. Thanks everybody who attended, and thank you, George, for assisting here.
thanks
Um,
for having me, Richard.
we'll see you guys
Sure.
on the upcoming event. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaina, for joining us. We will send you the recording and everyone as well. And for those who missed it, we will send you the recording. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.